Hello and welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about 3 common expectations that the fearful avoidant tends to have in their romantic relationships. But first, if you don't know me, my name's Marcella. I'm an attachment theory practitioner trained by Thais Gibson in the Personal Development School. I help women change their mindset to change their love story after trauma. So without further ado, let's just dive in. What is an expectation? An expectation is a belief that someone should behave a certain way. This usually arises because as humans, we have this deep belief that people are as we are, and it's not the way it is at all. In fact, if you behave a certain way and that means that you love somebody, then you expect other people to show you that they love you in that very certain way. And if you would never do something, for instance, I would never not call if I was running late. You expect out of your partner the very same thing. If they're running late, they should call you. Why wouldn't they call you, right? That must mean that they don't love or respect you. So this is where expectations come into place. Now, when we think in terms of the fearful avoidant, let's dive into common expectation number 1. And this is that nobody should ever break my trust and no lying ever. This is a huge one for the fearful avoidant. Now, where does this even come from? Fearful avoidants, if you're familiar, have a very big trust core wound. They have a very hard time trusting other people. And this is because they grew up in a chaotic and inconsistent environment in childhood. And so what happens is when you're growing up as a child, let's say you come home one day and you have a caregiver who's really present and they're attuned to you and they're meeting your needs. Then the next day you come home and maybe they're in a bad mood and they're not showing up for you anymore and they're kind of pushing you away, or maybe they even yell at you. And then another day you come home and now they're in a good mood again, right? And it goes like, it's like back and forth with, you never know what to expect. And so what happens as a child is that we don't have emotional literacy at an early age. So we tend to personalize and give meaning to every single thing that happens. So for the fearful avoidant, they gain this trust core wound that says, I am being betrayed, or I am or will be betrayed, and that I can't trust people that I love and get close to, because they take that inconsistency in early childhood as a betrayal. So it's like, my caregiver is there for me, okay, this feels nice, but then when I go to them and all of a sudden they shut me down or they push me away and they're just not there for me, or they act like they totally don't care, this feels like an extreme betrayal. The fearful avoidant child usually says, I am being betrayed because I put my trust into them and now they're not showing up for me. And you can't really process that, so you just make it mean I am being betrayed. And so what happens is you also associate this with people close to you that you love and you attach to. And so that's why it comes out so strongly in your adult life as well. So that expectation that no one should ever break my trust, no lying ever. Now I know you're thinking like, this is probably a good expectation to have, right? And the answer is yes here, but at the same time, it's like the fearful avoidant experiences this in extremes. So let's give an example here. Let's say that you sent lunch with your partner to work, and they come home from work and they say that they ate your lunch that you sent them for lunch today, right? They ate that lunch that you sent for them. And then later on, you hear in a conversation that they actually had lunch somewhere else that day with one of their coworkers. Well, as a fearful avoidant, this sets off alarm bells. The fearful avoidant isn't going to look at that situation and be like, oh, they probably just didn't want to hurt my feelings. Instead, they jump to extremes, like worst case scenarios. They hear like, oh my God, they lied to me, like something isn't adding up. And then they start spiraling and they say, why are they lying? Who were they with? What did they really do? Or can I even trust them? So this is when it becomes an issue. Fearful avoidants tend to catastrophize things because of the early childhood trauma that they went through, and they reproject it onto their reality constantly, always looking for that threat of somebody lying to them or potentially going to betray them. Now, Let's talk about expectation number 2. And this is that my partner should be faithful in thought, opinion, action, and feeling. And so again, this might be something where you're like, isn't this something that might be a good expectation to have, right? But again, fearful avoidants tend to experience these things in extremes. So an example of this is like, let's say that your partner comes home and you're telling them about a confrontation you got into at the store with the clerk, and you had a disagreement, and you're explaining to them in detail what happened, and instead of your partner taking your side, they actually say that they see the perspective of the other person, and maybe you shouldn't have taken it so personally. And in that moment, the fearful avoidant would probably feel like a 10 out of 10 triggered. Why? Because they have this belief that you should be on their side, right? You should be faithful to them. You should be kind of like on their team all the time in every single way. And the moment that you say something like that, the fearful avoidant is going to get tripped up and be like, oh my God, they're not being faithful to me. Why are they taking their side? And feeling really like they don't matter and they're uncared about, and almost feeling like this sense of betrayal. So it links back to really that core wound of I am or will be betrayed, and they kind of take these types of things in extremes and make it mean that they are being betrayed. And another example around like my partner should be faithful in thought, opinion, action, and feeling is that if you go out like to dinner with your partner, right? And an attractive person walks by and maybe they kind of like bat an eye at them, but nothing too personal, because then that would be disrespectful, right? But like fearful avoidance will tend to kind of like shut down when something like this happens, because it's like they feel like their partner is now automatically interested in this other person, and like they have this unsaid, unspoken expectation that my partner should be faithful and just be sitting here with me, and they shouldn't even look another way, right? They should just be here with me 1000%. And if they're not, then that's being disrespectful. They must not love me. They must not care about me. And again, this is how the fearful avoidant tends to really work in extremes, right? And this is because, again, they have like these trust core wounds where it's like they feel like they're going to be betrayed. So, as a coping mechanism, they tend to be hyper attuned to their environment, every single thing that is going on around them, and paying attention, because it's like this is how they've learned to maintain their safety. It's like if I can catch red flags in their mind, right? Red flags, even though sometimes they're overdoing it, then I can act on this, abort ship before something bad actually taking place to protect myself, right? So that's just a little bit there. And then finally, this is the big one. Let's talk about expectation number 3. And this is that my partner should make me feel wanted and desired at all times. This is a very big one for the fearful avoidant attachment style. Where does this stem from? Well, there's a couple things going on here for the fearful avoidant. Number one being that the fearful avoidant already struggles with feelings of unworthiness and feeling not good enough, right? So it's like when their partner is showing up for them and making them feel desired and wanted, it kind of soothes them. It gives them a sense of like certainty and reassurance in the relationship, because fearful avoidants tend to be in their head quite often. It's like always trying to figure out what is going on. Is my partner still into me? Are they losing interest? Are they getting bored? What's going to happen? And the fearful avoidant is constantly trying to earn their worth, right? And then they get frustrated and they're like, well, I wouldn't feel this way if this person would just make me feel wanted and desired all the time. Because when they do, the fearful avoidant is more calm and soothed. And then, like, when they're not doing that for a while, the fearful avoidant tends to feel dysregulated and like something wrong is happening in the relationship, or something bad is going to happen, or like the connection is kind of falling apart. And a second factor of this is that the fearful avoidant because they grew up in a chronically chaotic environment, that is their subconscious comfort zone. A lot of fearful avoidants experience a lot of turbulence in the home. So maybe like their parents fighting a lot, or a lot of heightened moments, like I mentioned, when things were really good or really bad. Usually they had a parent who was probably like an alcoholic, or had a personality disorder, or had their own depression and emotional things going on. So there was always like these highs and lows going on. And so what happens is the fearful avoidant associates these heightened experiences, like because they grew up around that, with love. So when they get into romantic relationships, that is like their subconscious comfort zone, is how we like to call it. And so when they get into relationships, they're expecting the relationship to be operating at an all-time high. And when it's not, they start getting fearful that something is going on in the connection. And then they start bringing this turbulence in by recreating things, scenarios to kind of like pick at, or maybe like fight about, or, just recreating that turbulence in any way that they can, so that they can feel safe in the connection. Because our brain does something where it equates familiarity to safety. And even if consciously you might know that this isn't right, your subconscious mind is like, this is familiar. We grew up this way, and this is what I want, because that's what I equate with safety, and therefore it will continue to seek it out. Now, if this is something you want to look into changing, there are two things that I recommend doing here. Number one is going to be learning what your deep inner core wounds are. How can you do this? Well, there are processes that you can work with a coach or myself to go ahead and figure out what your core wounds are, and I can help you reprogram these subconscious core wounds so that they don't keep showing up and running your life. If you didn't know, our subconscious mind is actually responsible for 95 to 97% of all of our actions, emotions, and decisions, to where our conscious mind is only responsible for 3 to 5%. So if you don't engage your subconscious mind in the process of any change that you really want to see in your life, then the chances of this actually happening or taking place are very little, very little. This is why you can see that your conscious mind can be like, I want this, I want to do this differently, or I don't want to be in this relationship, or I don't want to have this bad behavior anymore. But at the end of the day, you can't overcome it. Why? Because your subconscious mind has these existing programs and beliefs that it's going to keep running until you use those same principles of how we initially got programmed, through repetition plus emotion, that imprints our subconscious mind to kind of reprogram these things back out, or program in the things that you actually want to see. And then number two is going to be the ability to question the stories that come up in your mind. You see, on a regular basis, when you're not consciously thinking, right, your subconscious mind is actually sending these thoughts up on autopilot all the time. So you might notice, like, if you're just hanging out on Sunday morning and like all these thoughts start running through your head, why does this happen? Because your subconscious mind is the one running the show. Your subconscious mind is bringing up these beliefs, and it's like, hey, this might be going on. If you have the belief that you are or going to be betrayed, right? That's a core wound, and that's what I call a belief. This is creating thoughts on an autopilot mode. So it's like, it might be sending thoughts to your mind like, oh my God, what did my partner do last week? Oh my gosh, my partner was late. What happened? Or, he's been acting a little suspicious lately. How come he hasn't really like been showing like he really loves me or cares for me? All these things, they kind of like are thoughts that come up on autopilot. So what you can do is, if you start wanting to practice awareness around that, you can start questioning the thoughts that come up so you don't invest in them anymore as if they are an absolute truth. And here's a simple process for you to do that. Number one, I want you to ask yourself, is the story that I am telling myself true? The short answer is probably no. Number two, what else could it be other than the meaning that I am giving it, right? So let me give you an example around this. Let's say the story you're telling yourself is that your partner's been acting weird lately and they must be losing interest. So I would ask myself, can I know this is true? No. What else could it be other than this? Well, they might just be really stressed out from work. They said they've been working on this project. Um, they also recently got a cold, so I know that they're just not feeling their best. And number three, it's like they're probably just not even thinking about it. Maybe they have a whole bunch of things on their mind and it hasn't even crossed their mind, but maybe it will. And maybe they want me to like come after them, right? You never know, right? So just come up with three pieces of proof that it's like, what else could it be other than this? And then this will help soothe your mind so that you're not constantly investing in these like thoughts that are just popping up out of the blue for no dang reason at all. And again, if you're interested in working with me, I do coaching sessions. I also have a blueprint for the fearful avoidant located on my website. And if you're interested in that, go ahead and visit my website for that. But I hope everyone has a wonderful day. God bless.